I stood in a boutique cafe on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, casually sliding my husband's black card through the reader. Massimo Moreau's unlimited corporate card. Before I could even secure my grip on the coffee cup, 3 uniformed NYPD officers burst through the entrance. Mrs. Ophelia Moreau, you are under arrest for the embezzlement of Moreau Group corporate funds. Step away from the counter. The next second, my face was slammed hard against the freezing marble floor. Handcuffs clicked tight around my wrists. While my brain was still struggling to process the sudden impact, my phone vibrated violently against the tiles. It was Liliana, Massimo's newly appointed personal secretary. Her voice was dripping with youthful arrogance. Do you have any idea whose money you just spent, Ophelia? Every single dollar on that card belongs to Don Moreau. Don Moreau manages the family estate, deals with the board, and handles the underground shipping lines. He works himself to the bone while you do nothing but squander his fortune. As his wife, aren't you ashamed? She paused, waiting for me to break. Starting today, I am personally auditing all of your expenses. You want to spend a single cent, you submit a formal request to me first. No funds move without my signature. Furthermore, your allowance for this month is capped at $500. That coffee you just ordered, it cost $499. I suggest you learn some financial restraint for the next 30 days. Listening to her condescending, self-righteous lecture, a low laugh escaped my throat. It was a quiet sound, mostly born out of sheer pity. Liliana Costa had only been with the Moreau Group for a single month. Just because she sat right outside Massimo's office, she truly believed she was transitioning into the next matriarch of the Moreau syndicate. What the poor girl didn't realize was a fundamental truth. The real power behind the entire Moreau empire had never belonged to Massimo. It belonged to me. I was the majority shareholder of the Moreau Group. The underground casinos, the logistics networks, and the capital lines fueling the arms trade were all registered under my name. Even the exclusive black cards that granted Massimo his high society status were directly tied to my personal offshore accounts. Even the bloated monthly salary Liliana took home was cut from my private foundation. The man the public whispered about in absolute terror, the ruthless Don Moreau, was nothing more than a beggar who had married into my family line years ago. Who the hell was she to tell me how to spend my own money? The arresting officers were close enough to overhear the entire exchange over the speakerphone. Their eyes instinctively drifted down to the glowing screen of my device. The transaction notification read, "Spent, $352," and suffocating silence blanketed the cafe. The officers' expressions instantly drained of color. The lead sergeant began to sweat profusely, a cold bead tracing down his temple. No law enforcement officer in New York needed a lecture on what the Moreau name signified. They weren't just a corporate entity. They were the apex predators dominating the entire East Coast underworld. "Donna, we are profoundly sorry," the sergeant stuttered, rapidly unlocking the cuffs. His tone was laced with pure terror. "We will track down the source of this fraudulent emergency call immediately." But I couldn't even stand up to acknowledge him. I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles turning white. A sharp, agonizing spasm ripped through my lower abdomen, sending a wave of cold sweat dripping down my spine. "Get me to a hospital," I gasped out, my voice cracking under the intense strain. "The baby, it's coming." The entire cafe erupted into chaos. 10 minutes later, a fleet of black cruisers tore through the Manhattan traffic, sirens screaming as they sped toward the private medical center. Inside the hospital's restricted VIP wing, the head nurse was frantically processing my admission papers. Fighting through another wave of blinding pain, I pulled a premium black card from my wallet and handed it over. Moments later, the nurse returned, her expression a mix of confusion and hesitation. "Mrs. Moreau, your accounts have been completely declined." "The system says they are frozen." A chill washed over my entire body. That's impossible. Specific accounts held hundreds of millions in liquid assets. No one possessed the clearance to lock them unless they held supreme executive authority. Then, Liliana's smug voice echoed back into my mind. My eyes turned dead and cold. I immediately dialed Massimo's private, encrypted line. It rang 3 times. The line clicked open. "Massimo, listen to me. Ophelia, don't you ever tire of throwing tantrums." Liliana's exhausting voice cut me off before I could finish. "Place a temporary restriction on your vanity budget, and you immediately run to call your husband to complain." She let out a soft, mocking giggle. In the background, I could faintly hear the elegant classical music playing inside the high-security family boardroom. Me clarify something for you. This directive came straight from Don Moreau himself. Entire financial department answers exclusively to me now. The pain in my abdomen was making it hard to breathe, but I squeezed the phone until my fingers bruised. I am currently in the hospital. My assets right now. Or put Massimo on the line. His tone turned even more venomous. The Don is currently in a closed-door meeting with the Sicilian capos. He doesn't have time to handle domestic squabbles. From this point forward, the estate payroll, household expenses, and staff assignments run through my desk. You need emergency funds, fine. The paperwork according to the new protocol. I deem it acceptable, I will approve a voucher. She paused, a malicious sneer practically audible through the speaker. Oh, I almost forgot. Your remaining balance for the month is exactly $1. Don't go over budget, Donna. Last remnants of my control snapped. A violent, tearing sensation ripped through my womb, forcing me against the corridor wall. My voice shook with an icy rage. Liliana Costa. To me very carefully. I am standing outside a delivery room. I am in labor. More importantly, I have never spent a single dime of Massimo's money. Those accounts belong to my bloodline. You do not reverse the freeze within 60 seconds, I will make sure the entire city learns the truth. That a pathetic, low-tier secretary dared to rob the true matriarch of the Moreau family. The line went completely dead for a few seconds, then she abruptly hung up on me. A second later, a text message flashed on my screen from Liliana Costa. Donna, doesn't all your wealth come from Don Moreau anyway? You shouldn't use your title to bully subordinates. I have already authorized a systemic freeze on all accounts associated with your name. I've also notified our banking partners and family associates that no loans are to be extended to you. Once you're ready to humble yourself, apologize for your behavior, and promise to stop bleeding the Don's corporate accounts dry, I will consider restoring your access. She concluded the text with a smiley face emoji. A blatant, venomous provocation. I stared at the screen, a thick wave of nausea rising in my chest as the contractions hit me back to back, harder than before. Before the darkness fully claimed my vision, I forced my trembling fingers to dial the direct line of our chief legal counsel. Effective immediately, terminate Liliana Costa from all positions within the syndicate, revoke every security clearance she holds, and I gripped the phone with the last ounce of my strength. Suspend Massimo Moreau's executive powers as acting president. Tell him to drag his pathetic ass to this hospital right now. Moment the final syllable left my lips, my world went entirely black. A simple secretary. Without a powerful man backing her up, she wouldn't have the audacity to step on a Donna. Yet, a part of me still struggled to accept the reality of it. The man who had once sworn to throw away his entire future just to protect me. Was he truly betraying me for a girl who had joined the firm 30 days ago? The Moreau family commanded an empire worth hundreds of billions. But in this generation, I was the sole heir to the bloodline. Rather than entering a strategic corporate marriage and handing half of my birthright to a rival family, I preferred a different path. I wanted a man who would marry into my house, a loyal lieutenant to guard the kingdom while I ruled. To find someone genuine, I had hidden my identity and entered the Moreau Group as an entry-level analyst. That was where I met Massimo. Back then, he was just a fresh Ivy League graduate. He wore cheap, off-the-rack suits and lived in a crumbling apartment in the roughest part of Brooklyn. But he was strikingly handsome. Blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and a raw, dangerous ambition unique to men hungry to escape the dirt. He arrived at the office before sunrise. He was always the last one to leave the floor. At 2 a.m, you could always find him sitting under the harsh fluorescent lights of the accounting department, meticulously cross-checking data. While others bitched about overtime, he silently audited entire ledgers for the fun of it. Sometimes, I stayed late just to watch him. In those quiet, empty midnight hours, his ears would turn bright red as he handed me a fresh cup of coffee. "It's not safe for you to commute this late," he would murmur softly. "Leave the rest of the spreadsheets to me. Go home, Ophelia. I've got you covered." That generic cubicle, my heart skipped a beat for a man for the very first time, but I truly fell for him during the project scandal a year later. A senior analyst had stolen my market expansion strategy and presented it to the executive board as his own. When I confronted him, he flipped the narrative, accusing me of intellectual theft. The analyst was backed by a powerful regional VP. The VP made the executive decision to fire me on the spot, threatening a multi-million-dollar lawsuit for leaking trade secrets. At that exact moment, Massimo was on the fast track to a major promotion. All he had to do was keep his mouth shut, and his corporate ascension would be guaranteed. Instead, he slammed both hands on the mahogany conference table, standing up abruptly. The entire boardroom fell into a dead, terrified silence. The young man stepped directly in front of me, his broad shoulders blocking me from the executives. His spine was perfectly straight. Ophelia is incapable of theft. I put my career on the line for her. The VP let out a mocking laugh. Your career? You're a nobody. What is your guarantee worth? Massimo ripped his corporate ID badge off his neck and threw it onto the center of the table. If this syndicate forces out an innocent employee to protect a thief, then I don't want a seat at this table anyway. If she walks, I walk. Without waiting for a response, he grabbed my hand and led me out of the boardroom in front of the entire executive staff. We ran all the way out of the Moreau Tower, into the brisk autumn air. The city wind messed up his blonde hair. He was breathing heavily, but his first instinct was to turn and cup my face. Look back, he whispered. I'm with you. That was the exact moment I chose him. I wrapped my arms around his neck, letting go of all my standard reservations. Massimo, I love you. Do you love me? Marry me. Let's do it. We're wed shortly after. The ceremony took place on a private estate in Sicily. The entire island was locked down by automated security systems for 3 full days. Every major family from the global underworld arrived to pay their respects. Countless capos and billionaire oligarchs bowed their heads to me, kissing my ring and uttering the title with absolute reverence. Donna. And Massimo formally took the mantle of Don Moreau. After the wedding, to prepare my body for the next heir, I slowly stepped back from the daily operations of the syndicate. The casinos, the shipping routes, the tactical investments. I handed the keys to Massimo. And for a while, he performed beautifully. Within a few short years, the Moreau Shadow Network expanded exponentially. Until 6 weeks ago, Massimo came home and mentioned he wanted to sponsor a handful of underprivileged graduates from his alma mater, bringing them into the corporate pipeline. I gave him my blessing. Liliana Costa was among that select group. Yet, within 10 days of stepping foot into the building, she bypassed every senior analyst, rising from a standard assistant to the Don's personal secretary. Soon, the whispers started filtering back to my estate. My sources within the administrative pool began sending quiet updates. They reported that Liliana personally prepared gourmet lunches every afternoon, carrying them into Don Moreau's private office. The heavy oak doors would lock for hours at a time. No executive dared to interrupt them. Some staff members even claimed they saw Liliana exiting the suite in the evening, flushed and disheveled, wearing Massimo's bespoke suit jacket over her shoulders. Massimo explained it this way. Liliana works hard and she's brilliant. I can't hold her back just because she's young and fresh out of college, can I? In the study, Massimo had just wrapped up a transatlantic meeting with the Sicilian families. He shed his black suit jacket and tossed it carelessly over the arm of the sofa. The fire from the hearth cast sharp shadows across his cold, chiseled profile. As the reigning Don of the Moreau family, he carried an suffocating aura of absolute power. Yet every time he faced me, that dangerous edge automatically softened. He walked over and knelt before me, gently placing his palm over my swollen belly. His grayish-blue eyes looked up at me. I only made her my secretary for work. And that lunch thing, it's just because she's such a workaholic. She wanted to go over files during lunch, so she brought her food into my office. Is nothing between us. But if it makes you uncomfortable, if you're jealous, I'll replace her right now. He spoke with complete sincerity and tenderness. There was even a hint of playful indulgence in his last sentence. The entire New York underworld knew that Don Moreau was not a patient man. At the negotiation table, he could force his rivals to their knees without blinking. Yet with me, he was always endlessly patient. So I never doubted him. I wasn't the kind of insecure woman who would interfere with corporate growth over baseless gossip anyway. Privately, I had even looked over Liliana's resume. Born in the slums, she had climbed her way into an Ivy League school on full scholarships. After joining the company, she handled several high-level meetings flawlessly. Facing a room full of cutthroat directors and capos, she held her ground with perfect grace. I admired ambitious girls like her. Not only did I pay off her student loans in full, but I also gave her a raise and promoted her to chief of staff. I even warned the rest of the secretarial pool. Stop spreading rumors. Don't ruin a young girl's reputation. I thought I was investing in a rising star. I never expected I was nursing a viper that wanted to steal my throne. It started with small things, like how she frequently entered the Moreau estate under the pretext of fetching files for Massimo. Then one day, I came home and discovered something shocking. The security gate code to the estate had been changed to Liliana's birthday. The entire Long Island Moreau estate was backed by an independent security system and a private militia. Even the NYPD didn't have the authority to step foot inside. The gate code was a privilege reserved strictly for core family members. My face fell instantly. I called Liliana in and demanded an explanation. Her eyes welled with tears on the spot. "I'm so sorry, Donna. I just fetch files for Don Moreau so often, and I was terrified I'd mix up the numbers." She hung her head, looking like she was about to burst into tears from sheer victimization. Though displeased, I didn't press the matter further. But that night, after attending a family gala, Massimo never came home. His phone was switched off. I couldn't reach him for a full 24 hours. I mobilized half of the Moreau family manpower to track him down. I nearly called the police. It wasn't until the following afternoon that I finally received a call from him. "Baby, I'm already home." I rushed back to the estate. When I pushed the front door open, I froze. Liliana was wearing my silk nightgown, casually making breakfast for Massimo in the kitchen. The morning sun bathed her in light. She looked exactly like the true mistress of this house. Catching sight of me, her eyes turned red instantly as she scrambled to explain. "I'm so sorry, Donna. I'm just so stupid. I really couldn't remember your gate code." Don Moreau was completely wasted, and since I couldn't get in, I had no choice but to take him to a hotel for the night. "But I swear, we didn't do anything." A wave of fury instantly surged through me. But before I could even speak, Massimo's face darkened. The man stood in the center of the dining room, the aura radiating from him terrifyingly cold. In that split second, he was no longer the gentle husband who coddled me. He was the Don who ruled the entire Moreau syndicate. He pointed sharply at the front door. "Get out. Can't remember a 6-digit code and don't know how to turn on a phone. It seems the chief of staff position is too difficult for you. Don't bother coming into work tomorrow." Hearing this, Liliana broke down sobbing. "I'm sorry, Don Moreau. I really didn't mean to. Please don't fire me. My mom needs $200,000 for her surgery, and we're relying on my salary to pay for it. If you fire me, my family is ruined." Massimo's expression remained icy. "Apologize to me. Apologize to my wife. You made my pregnant wife stress out because of your incompetence. If she doesn't forgive you today, you can cry yourself to death for all I care. You're gone." At his words, Liliana dropped to her knees before me with a loud thud. She raised her hands and began slapping herself across the face over and over. "I'm sorry, Donna. I was just terrified of waking you up in the middle of the night and hurting your health. It's my fault. I'm stupid and I have no social awareness. Beat me. Curse at me, just please don't fire me." She wept beautifully, looking like a shattered flower. Massimo stepped up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. He leaned down and gently nuzzled my cheek, acting like he was soothing a temperamental wife. "Baby, why are you always so kind? She crossed the line and I wanted to throw her out myself. But since you said you forgive her, I have to listen to my queen. Don't worry, I'll dump a mountain of work on her and make her pull overnight shifts as punishment." Back then, wrapped in his embrace, I only felt pure sweetness. I never doubted Massimo's devotion to me. But Liliana pushed her boundaries again and again. Eventually, she was even able to freeze my credit cards and bank accounts with ease. To say this happened without Massimo's implicit permission was absolutely impossible. When I finally woke up, the hospital room was dead silent. Outside the window lay the gloomy New York night sky. Inside the top-floor VIP suite of the Moreau family's private hospital, armed bodyguards stood watch 24 hours a day. Yet the one person who should have been there, Massimo, was missing. The only person sitting by my bedside was the family attorney. Dressed in a sharp black suit, his expression was incredibly grave. Seeing me open my eyes, he immediately lowered his voice. "Donna." Don Moreau took his secretary out of town for a conference. He paused noticeably here. He said he won't be back until tomorrow. A wave of icy cold washed over me. The attorney studied my expression carefully before continuing with extreme caution. I pulled the attendance records for the past 2 weeks. I discovered that Don Morrow and Liliana frequently travel together for conferences. His tone shifted noticeably when he hit the word conferences. Then he handed me a manila folder. The places they visited. They are all luxury vacation resorts. I looked down at the file. Paris, the Maldives, Santorini, Vienna, not a single location held any business operations for the Morrow Syndicate. It looked exactly like a couple's honeymoon. My fingers tightened around the paper, crushing it. The attorney added softly. Furthermore, many employees in the office have seen Liliana's private social media posts. She frequently flaunts photos of her travels with Don Morrow. Do you want to see them? He handed me his phone. On the screen was a meticulously curated grid of photos posted by Liliana. Sky-high restaurants, private jets, luxury hotels. There was even a photo of Massimo wearing a silk robe, standing before a floor-to-ceiling window. Though it only showed his back, I recognized him instantly. Every single caption was dripping with sexual tension. Thank you to Don Morrow for driving me home tonight. This is our exclusive quality time. I complained that working overtime was too exhausting, so a certain someone bought me an overtime bonus. It's the Hermes bag I've been eyeing forever. I casually mentioned wanting to see the Eiffel Tower, and he flew across the Atlantic with me overnight. If this isn't love, what is? In the comments section, multiple employees had already begun leaving remarks. They were calling her the future Donna. I felt entirely numb, my hands and feet turning to ice. The attorney pressed on quietly. We also investigated Liliana's college background. It turns out she had an anonymous benefactor funding her tuition and lifestyle throughout her university years. That benefactor, he hesitated, was Don Morrow. College roommate once mentioned that Liliana constantly bragged about having a wealthy sugar daddy backing her. Looking at it now, that man was undoubtedly Don Morrow. The room fell into a deathly silence. I stared blankly at the phone's screen. My chest felt as though it had been violently ripped open. So it turned out. Long before I thought I was playing savior to a poor, struggling girl, he had been keeping her behind my back. The attorney remained silent for a moment before pulling out another document envelope. There is one more thing. Think you should see this for yourself. I took the papers and slid them out. With just one glance, my legs went weak. A loud buzzing sound filled my ears. It was an asset transfer authorization form. Printed clearly on the page, Massimo, utilizing his absolute authority as Don Morrow, was systematically transferring core assets of the Morrow family. And the new beneficiary was Liliana Costa. Even the secondary access codes to my personal jewelry vaults had been altered. I could barely stand. Clutching the folder with trembling hands, my voice shook. Take me home first. I need to think. When I arrived back at the Long Island estate, I found the entire property on lockdown. Dozens of bodyguards in black suits were moving crates out of the house. And those items were all the dowry pieces left to me by my parents, priceless emerald sets, a diamond tiara passed down for 2 decades, antique diamond necklaces symbolizing the matriarch of the Costa family. Everything was being hauled out of the vaults. They were packing them into brand new safes, crate by crate. My face drained of color. I lunged forward and grabbed one of the men. Do you think you're doing? Put my things down. But in the next second, the man coldly brushed my hand away. He didn't even bother to look me in the eye. Donna, from now on, all of your jewelry, accessories, bags, and gowns will be managed centrally by Liliana. You need to use any of them. Please submit a 5,000-word requisition form to Liliana's corporate email in advance. You may only withdraw them once Liliana signs off on the approval. That instant, pure rage consumed me. I whipped out my phone and dialed Massimo's number, but the person who answered was still Liliana. The girl's tone was airy, practically dripping with amusement. Oh, look, Donna. It's only been a day and you already have the energy to throw another tantrum at Don Morrow. I knew it. You definitely faked being sick yesterday just to extort money from him. You claimed you were going into labor. Your due date isn't even until next week. She let out a soft, mocking laugh. Oh, right, Donna. I forgot to mention. Your official due date is next Wednesday. Your medical expenses will only be covered by insurance if you deliver on that exact day. You give birth early. You'll have to cover the hospital bill out of your own pocket. Vision went entirely dark from the sheer fury. Forcing down the rage, I ground out every single syllable. Liliana, who gave you permission to touch my jewelry? Have your men return my things right this second. Otherwise, I will call the police and lock you up for grand theft. Liliana sneered, her eyes gleaming with utter disdain. Your things? Donna, have you forgotten who you are? You're just a low-level clerk. If you hadn't crawled into Don Morrow's bed and married him, you wouldn't be wearing millions of dollars in diamonds and designer gowns. She stood dead center in the hallway outside the CEO's office of the Morrow Group, flanked by rows of black-suited bodyguards. The surrounding employees kept their heads bowed, barely breathing. This was one of the absolute command centers of the East Coast Underground. Yet, she carried herself as if she owned the place. You're so greedy that you even use Don Morrow's money just to buy a damn coffee. I have every reason to suspect you're selling off the jewelry, accessories, and luxury goods he bought you just to pocket the cash. She let out a soft laugh, her tone growing more self-righteous by the second. Don Morrow's secretary, it is my responsibility to protect his assets. So from this day forward, you don't touch a single thing unless I say so. I clenched my jaw, my knuckles turning white. Liliana, don't push your luck. She chuckled softly, completely intoxicated by her illusion of control. Push my luck. She took a sudden step forward, lowering her voice, her words dripping with pure malice. By the way, I heard your mother is still staying in the hospital funded by our Don Morrow. Am I right? Seriously, a broke bitch with a leech of a sick mother. A collective gasp echoed through the hallway. Nobody dared to make a sound. She's been sick for so many years, draining millions from the Morrow family. To stop wasting Don Morrow's money, I had her kicked out of the hospital today. Entire body froze instantly. What did you say? The blood in my veins turned to ice. Liliana. Are you insane? My mother can't survive without her oxygen chamber. You're committing murder. I was practically screaming. I spun on my heel, marched straight to my car, and sped toward the hospital. Fortunately, some of the top executives at that hospital were still the people I had personally placed there years ago. My mother was rushed into a new VIP ICU. The ventilator was reattached. She was safe. As I stood by the hospital bed, staring at her pale face, my fingertips wouldn't stop shaking. The suffocating rage burning in my chest could no longer be contained. I turned to my lawyer, my voice freezing cold. Throw Liliana's mother out onto the street. Single cent I spent paying off her loans and treating her mother's illness over the years, recover all of it. And one more thing, I want to sue Liliana for attempted murder. I tucked the blanket around my mother, my movements eerily calm. Take me to the company. The vipers have shown their teeth, I will tear them out myself. The corporate headquarters, the atmosphere was visibly tense, employees were whispering in corners. Why is Donna here? Do you think she found out about Don and Liliana? Is she here to make a scene? She's just a housewife. How can she possibly fight Don? I kept my eyes straight ahead and walked right in. Just as I reached the CEO's suite, someone blocked my path. An unfamiliar young girl stood in front of the door, her face twisted in a sneer. This isn't a place where people like you can just wander in. Get out. An employee nearby quickly tried to intervene. Alina, move out of the way. This is Don Morrow's wife. Looked me up and down, letting out a contemptuous laugh. Oh, so you're Don Morrow's wife. You look so old. No wonder Don Morrow is disgusted by you. This is a place of business, not a playground for your tantrums. I suggest you go home before Don Morrow gets here. Don't wait around until he gets pissed off and kicks you to the curb. The hallway erupted into murmurs. I let out a cold laugh and raised my hand. Before she could react, my bodyguard stepped forward and pinned her down. A sharp slap echoed through the air, smack. Alina shrieked in agony. What the hell? Do you know who I am? How dare you strike me? I am Chief Secretary Liliana's best friend. Just wait until she finds out. She will destroy you. She laughed hysterically. You're just an old hag terrified that our Liliana is going to take your place as Donna, aren't you? Let me tell you something. If Liliana weren't so soft-hearted, you would have been kicked out of the Morrow family a long time ago. Once she gets back, Don will divorce you. You'll be thrown out with absolutely nothing. I stared down at her coldly. Then you better call them right now and tell them to get their asses over here. I came here today specifically to divorce Massimo, but the one leaving with absolutely nothing isn't going to be me. It's him. Moment the words left my mouth, heavy footsteps echoed from the end of the hallway. Massimo rushed in, with Liliana following closely behind. The moment his eyes landed on me, his face stiffened for a fraction of a second. He took a step forward, reaching out to grab my arm. Whatever this is, we're going home to talk about it. I yanked my arm away fiercely. We talk right here. Liliana immediately burst into tears, covering her face. Madam, I know you're angry because I restricted your spending, but you are just too extravagant. The company only makes tens of millions a year, and you buy a single necklace worth millions. I only did it for the good of the company. Her voice cracked with fabricated grievance. And my mother was kicked out of the hospital because of you. She almost died. The employees' glances instantly shifted, turning judgmental. Massimo's face darkened completely. Ophelia, enough. Liliana cut off your accounts to protect the company's growth. If you have a problem, take it out on me. Why the hell are you making her life miserable? If you keep acting like a psycho, I'm done with you. I let out a harsh laugh. I pulled out my phone and threw a handful of printed screenshots right at him. For the company? Or for your beloved secretary? Massimo's expression tightened. What bullshitting are you talking about? Stop slandering an innocent girl. I reached into my bag, pulled out a pregnancy report, and slammed it directly into his face. Liliana is pregnant. It's your child. Are you going to call it slander now? You even signed a guarantee promising her 5% of the company's shares once the bastard is born. Looked down at the paper. He fell silent for a single second. Then he looked up at me. There wasn't a hint of panic on his face. Instead, he was terrifyingly calm. Since you already know, I won't bother hiding it. Liliana is carrying my child, but I have no intention of divorcing you. He paused, as if making a grand concession. Once the baby is born, I'll bring it home so you can raise it with me. It bothers you that much. I'll set them up in another house. I won't let them eyesore you. The shares are just a safety net for the kid. Rest assured, the company will still belong to our future children. I laughed so hard my chest ached. Massimo, do you think you have any right to touch my shares? I don't give my consent. Massimo's face turned completely cold. Then we'll just get a divorce. Don't forget, we never signed a prenup. Even if we go to court, half of this company and all its assets belong to me. Been a housewife for so many years, you probably have no idea that the Moreau family has long been under my control. Your little shares can't do shit to shake my grip on this empire. When the time comes, I won't just give her 5%. I'll hand the entire Moreau family over to Liliana's child. I smiled, the expression sharp as a razor. You seem to have forgotten something. We didn't just get married, you married into my family. My things have absolutely nothing to do with you. I let you manage my assets for 5 years, and you actually forgot who the real owner of the Moreau family is. I gave a cold, commanding bark. Massimo, we are divorcing. You are leaving this house with nothing. Now, as the sole head of the Moreau family, I am officially informing you. You are fired. Bodyguards, throw these 2 pieces of trash out of my building right now. The entire room froze. In the next second, the crowd erupted like an explosion. The frantic whispering rolled in like a tidal wave. Married into her family? Is that for real? No wonder Don Moreau became CEO in just a few years. Does this mean? The company actually belongs to Donna. Liliana's face drained of color instantly. Massimo's hands clenched into tight fists, veins bulging violently against his skin. He glared at me, his teeth grinding so hard the words practically bled out of his mouth. Shut the fuck up. When did I ever marry into your family? The law doesn't care about your traditional bullshit. His voice suddenly spiked, screaming to mask his own terror. Everything acquired during our marriage is community property. Even if you drag this to court, it stays that thought. He seemed to catch a lifeline. He straightened his back, a smug sneer returning to his face. Besides, even if this company belonged to you in the beginning, so what? He looked around the room, his eyes scanning the sea of employees, dripping with absolute arrogance. You've been gone for 6 years. Who has been running this place? Who makes the executive decisions? Who puts money in everyone's pockets? Me. Every single person in this room was handpicked and promoted by me. Do you honestly think you can just walk back in, say a few words, and they'll follow you? The air in the room turned heavy, suffocatingly still, and then someone in the back murmured. Don Moreau actually has a point. He's the one who's been grinding for this company all these years. She's just a housewife. The tide of whispers began to turn against me. Liliana caught on instantly. The flash of panic in her eyes vanished, replaced by her signature damsel in distress mask. She took a delicate step forward, gently clutching Massimo's sleeve, her voice soft as silk. Don, please don't be angry. Then she turned to look at me, her eyes red, though a faint trace of superiority danced in her gaze. Madam, I know you're acting out of pure rage. Been isolated at home for so long, completely out of touch with corporate affairs. It's only natural that you can't handle reality. She let out a soft sigh as if pitying me. Power isn't a game. You can't make executive decisions based on a temper tantrum. She paused, a subtle, mocking smile playing on her lips. Apart from spending money like water, what exactly have you ever done for Don Moreau or this company? A few suppressed chuckles rippled through the crowd. Her voice dropped lower, sharpening like a needle. I am different. I am not trying to steal your place as Donna. I only want to ease Don's burdens and help him build this empire. There's no need for you to be so desperate. Suddenly, her tone shifted, hardening into a cold, authoritative command. She is clearly emotionally unstable and causing a scene. Where the hell is security? Escort her out of the building immediately. Don't let her disrupt our operations. The security guards exchanged uneasy glances. They hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then they began walking toward me. In that instant, the attitude of every employee in the room shifted entirely. Exactly, this is a corporation, not a place for her domestic drama. She shouldn't be ruining our workflow like this. Talking about firing Don Moreau, she's completely lost her mind. Cold, mocking faces. Everyone was eagerly choosing their side. I looked at them one by one. I memorized every single face. Then I smiled. Without another word to the crowd, I pulled out my phone. In front of everyone, I dialed a number. You can come in now. Voice was dead calm. Bring the legal team with you. It's time to settle the score with my ex-husband regarding asset embezzlement. The color drained from everyone's faces. Massimo lost his mind, screaming at the top of his lungs. What the fuck do you mean? What asset embezzlement? The call disconnected. Not even 3 seconds passed. Ding. The elevator doors slid open. Every single eye instinctively snapped toward the sound. A massive contingent of people marched out. Leading the pack was my personal attorney. Behind him followed a squad of the most elite, high-powered corporate lawyers in the city. The entire lobby fell into a deathly silence. The smug sneer on Massimo's face shattered. Liliana's hand instinctively let go of his sleeve. I took slow, deliberate steps forward. I stopped right in front of them. I raised my eyes, locking them onto Massimo. My voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to pierce through the silence of the room. Since you are so confident, I said, offering a small, venomous smile, let's do the math in front of everyone. Let's see exactly how much of my money you've stolen over the past 5 years. Lead attorney took a step forward. His voice was entirely devoid of emotion, like a judge reading a death sentence. Since things have escalated to this point, I will make a brief statement on behalf of Ms. Ophelia. Collectively held their breath. The attorney flipped open the leather-bound file. First, from the very date of its inception to the present moment, all equity, corporate structures, and capital sources of this company belong strictly to the Moreau Family Trust. Mr. Massimo has zero actual ownership or legal ties to this entity. The crowd erupted into a frenzy. So Don Moreau was literally just a glorified employee working for Donna all these years. Massimo's face turned a ghostly, ash-white. The attorney didn't stop. Second, all jewelry, luxury goods, bank accounts, and personal financial lines under Ms. Moreau's name are likewise legally classified as assets of the Moreau family estate. Single dollar spent during your marriage did not utilize community property. Instead, he looked up, staring directly into Massimo's hollow eyes. He delivered the final blow, word by word. They were internal lines of credit borrowed directly from the family trust. In other words, both of you are currently indebted to the Moreau family accounts. You share immense joint debt, but you have absolutely zero joint assets. The room fell into a deathly silence. Someone drew in a sharp, collective breath. The attorney flipped to the next page. Third, over the past 5 years, every single instance of Ms. Ophelia Moreau providing personal financial support, living expenses, and corporate resources to Massimo has been meticulously documented. Rattled off a string of numbers, each figure was more outrageous than the last. The crowd began to stir. Massimo's breathing turned heavy, his chest heaving. Furthermore, the attorney paused, his voice dropping to a freezing register. Massimo used corporate accounts to illegally transfer funds into his personal accounts, totaling. He named the exact amount. The entire floor froze for 3 agonizing seconds. Someone in the crowd couldn't help but mutter under their breath. Jesus, that's not just a minor discrepancy. That's straight-up embezzlement. The attorney closed the folder with a sharp snap. He looked over at the 2 law enforcement officers standing by. We have completely mapped out the flow of these funds. The evidence is airtight. We are ready to press charges at any moment. Then he opened another file. Costa, without authorization, froze Ms. Ophelia's personal accounts, manipulated company funds, and transferred jewelry assets. The amount involved easily crosses the threshold for criminal prosecution. She is looking at grand larceny and felony abuse of power. His face drained of color, turning a ghostly white. She took a frantic step back. I was doing it for Don Moreau. Don Moreau told me to do it. Massimo, say something, speak up. Her voice shook violently, but Massimo couldn't even hear her anymore. He stood frozen to the spot. The color bled from his face inch by inch. He had always believed this was his company. He thought he was spending his own money. He thought he could move wealth around at his whim. But now, the lawyer was slapping him in the face with cold, brutal facts. None of it belonged to him. And once they pressed charges for his past operations, he was going to federal prison. Panic finally pierced through his arrogance. He snapped his head toward me, real terror flashing in his eyes for the very first time. Ophelia, voice trembled. You've been plotting against me this whole time. I stared back at him. My gaze was entirely devoid of warmth. Plotting against you. I let out a soft, mocking chuckle. I actually trusted you. You married into my family. I explicitly told you that the Moreau family has strict standards for a son-in-law who takes our name. You were the one who insisted it didn't matter. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. Original plan was to hand over a massive block of shares to you after the baby was born. To let you officially sit in the CEO's chair with real power. I raised my eyes to lock onto his. You did this to yourself. You blew your own chance. I reached into my bag and pulled out a legal document. I slammed it directly against his chest. Divorce papers. Sign it. The pages scattered, fluttering down around his expensive shoes. Massimo flinched as if he had been struck by lightning. In the next second, he lunged forward, grabbing my wrist in a desperate grip. Ophelia, don't do this. His voice warped with panic. Let's go home and talk about this, okay? This kind of stuff, we can settle it privately. There's no need to make a public scene. He lowered his voice, his tone a toxic mix of frantic begging and veiled threats. If you keep pushing this, the company's reputation will take a hit. The stock price will crash. You're a shareholder, too. You can't just ignore the bottom line. I didn't move an inch. Massimo's breathing was completely erratic now. He stepped closer, his voice losing all semblance of control. And have you even thought about it? If we actually get a divorce, what happens to the company? He scanned the executives in the room, frantically grasping at his last lifeline. A multi-billion-dollar empire like this, who runs it without me? Can you find a more qualified CEO than me anywhere in this city? He stared at me, his eyes stripped of all previous calm, revealing nothing but a crumbling, desperate mess. And the baby. We have a family together. A child needs a father. The air in the room grew heavy enough to suffocate. Suddenly, his voice softened, dropping into a shattered, pathetic plea. I can cut Liliana loose. I promise. From now on, I'll only focus on you and our life together. I'll resign. Give up everything. Stay home and take care of the family. He took another step forward, his voice dropping to a trembling whisper. Ophelia, let's just start over, please. Behind him, Liliana finally snapped. She let out a piercing shriek and burst into hysterical tears. Massimo, how could you do this to me? 4 years. I've been with you for 4 years. I am carrying your baby right now. How can you just say you'll cut me loose? She sobbed, her heart breaking spectacularly in front of everyone. You told me I was the only one you loved. You said you only approached Ophelia because her family had money. You said you were disgusted by her years. The fuck up. Massimo whipped around and roared. But that shout was entirely hollow, completely stripped of any real authority. Ophelia, don't listen to her bullshit. The person I love most has always been you. He turned back to me, his voice urgent. Dripping with pathetic sycophancy. He desperately wanted to erase every single word that had just come out of her mouth. I slowly raised my hand. One by one, I pried his fingers off my wrist. My movements were agonizingly slow and freezing cold. I looked him dead in the eye. I delivered each word like ice. Do you honestly think? I let out a faint, effortless smile. That I need you. The room went completely dead. Even the hum of the air conditioning felt like too much noise. I gave my final ultimatum. Sign the papers, right now. Otherwise, I locked eyes with him, my gaze utterly merciless. We will see each other in federal court. I highly doubt you want the entire high society circle to find out exactly what dirty shit you've been pulling these past few years. The tension in the air cracked, right at that exact second. The heavy double doors of the boardroom were thrown open. Instinctively, everyone whipped their heads around. The highest-ranking executives of the corporation marched in, one after another. The chief financial officer, the head of legal, the chief risk officer, the lead auditor, every single major player was present. They had been waiting outside the entire time, just waiting for my signal to enter. Massimo's face turned completely translucent. He watched the very people who used to bow to him now line up directly behind me. That visceral sensation of being utterly stripped of power made him panic for the very first time. He looked down at the divorce agreement on the table. His hand began to shake violently. Finally, he grabbed the pen and signed. The sharp scratch of the nib tearing across the paper sounded like metal scraping against bone. He slammed the pen down the moment the final stroke was finished. He snapped his head up to glare at me. His eyes were filled with a toxic, uncontrollable malice. "You're going to regret this." The words tore from his throat. He spun on his heel and stormed out. His retreating figure looked pathetic, practically fleeing the room. Liliana chased after him in a blind panic, unable to even form a coherent sentence. The boardroom was left with just me and the sea of top executives. In the next second, every single executive bowed their heads in perfect unison. "Donna, we deeply apologize. This was our failure of oversight." I raised a hand, cutting them off. "It has nothing to do with you. I simply trusted the wrong man." I paused for a beat. My gaze turned to absolute steel. But when a mistake is made, we crush it. Starting that very day, the entire corporation began a massive internal purge. It was a silent, mathematically precise storm. I showed absolutely no mercy. Every single employee who had aligned themselves with Massimo was terminated, one by one, including the girl at the front desk, Alina. She sobbed and begged for forgiveness, screaming that she was just following orders. I didn't even waste a glance on her. The finance department began a comprehensive audit, line by line. They dragged every single one of Massimo's financial transactions over the years out into the light. Simultaneously, the legal department built the asset embezzlement case, preparing the criminal indictment. By the time I finally finished cleaning up the wreckage, an entire month had passed. The corporation was running smoothly again. Everything was moving in the right direction. But practically overnight, major clients suddenly started backing out of deals, and our market share was aggressively squeezed. The company's market value plummeted by nearly 10%. I only found out the root cause during a brief intermission between executive meetings. Massimo, he started a rival firm. He set up his own operation, my secretary reported in a hushed whisper. He managed to pull away a core group of our legacy clients. He also rushed a launch to steal the market on our upcoming product line. Right now, the media is saying, she hesitated, glancing at me nervously. They're saying you only took power because of your family trust, but you lack any actual competence to run the business. He's been hitting the industry circuit heavily, attending every major gala and forum. He's openly bragging that he's going to destroy you. He claims he's going to force you to bow your head and beg for his forgiveness. I simply nodded, entirely unbothered. Understood. Very quickly, the entire industry caught wind of the feud. Everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the circus. They wanted to see which of the ex-spouses would ultimately come out on top. And Liliana had completely dropped her victim act. Flaunting her pregnant belly, she kept her arm tightly looped through Massimo's, parading around as the new Donna. She made sure to frequent every high-profile cocktail party, business forum, and charity gala in the city. Her laughter was loud, arrogant, and deliberate. During a recent gala, an associate tried to bait me. "Donna, given the current bleeding of your market share, what is your next move?" I merely offered a slow, calm smile. "What's the rush? The real show hasn't even started yet." The day it all collapsed. It was the largest industry gala and bidding event of the year. The moment I stepped into the venue, I ran straight into Massimo and Liliana. Massimo was sharp in a tailored suit, looking utterly triumphant, acting as if the absolute disaster of our divorce had never even happened. Liliana kept her arm tightly looped through his, her pregnant belly slightly protruding. She stared at me with a sickening mix of defensiveness and arrogance. She spoke up, her voice just loud enough to cut through the surrounding conversations. "Poor Donna. Can't even keep a man." She let out a nasty, mocking giggle. "And now she can't even hold on to her family business. Must be exhausting trying to be a badass corporate single mom, huh?" I looked at her. I offered a polite, hollow smile, completely ignoring her words, and walked straight past them to greet the other executives. Liliana gnawed on her lower lip, her face flushing with pure humiliation at being entirely dismissed. Massimo, however, kept his eyes glued to me, his gaze twisted with a complex storm of emotions. During a brief intermission, he intercepted me near the bar. "Ophelia," he muttered, dropping his voice. "You see how things are now. You can't survive this market alone." He paused, attempting to soften his tone into something resembling affection. If you regret your choice, I might actually consider taking you back. I didn't say a word. He kept pushing, mistaking my silence for submission. I can stabilize the company for you. All you have to do, he glanced over at Liliana, who was watching from a short distance away, is accept them. Let them into the family. Stop making her life a living hell. We can still go back to how things used to be. Stared down at me as if he were granting a divine pardon. I let out a soft, effortless chuckle, but before the first word could leave my mouth, bang, the heavy double doors of the grand ballroom were violently thrown open. A squad of armed police officers marched straight into the venue. The crowd erupted into chaotic murmurs. The lead detective locked his eyes directly onto Massimo, his voice booming with cold authority. Massimo, you are under arrest for corporate embezzlement, grand larceny, and the theft of trade secrets. Away from the crowd and come with us. Massimo froze entirely, the color draining from his face. Took a frantic step back, his voice cracking into a high pitch. You've got the wrong guy. You have to be mistaken. The detective remained entirely expressionless, flashing an official federal warrant. Massimo, you unauthorizedly accessed unpublished project data from the Moreau Group server, used it to launch your rival firm, and rushed the product to market. This constitutes federal intellectual property theft. Shred of evidence, including the source code, server access logs, and your personal digital footprint, has already been seized and locked down. Single syllable landed like a sledgehammer against his chest. His skin turned a sickly, translucent white. Liliana let out a blood-curdling shriek. Lies, that's a goddamn lie. She clutched Massimo's arm with a desperate, white-knuckled grip, her voice shaking uncontrollably. Massimo, say something, tell them they're wrong, speak up. The detective shifted his piercing gaze over to her, his voice dropping into a freezing register. Liliana Costa. You are under arrest for the illegal interference of medical resources and the intentional transfer of a critical ICU patient, which directly placed a life in imminent jeopardy. You are being taken into custody under suspicion of attempted murder. Completely lost her mind. It wasn't me. I didn't do anything. I just moved her to a different room. She didn't even die. She screamed hysterically, her screeching voice echoing off the high ceilings, entirely out of control. The grand ballroom fell into a deathly, suffocating silence. The looks directed at her from the elite crowd were filled with nothing but absolute disgust and revulsion. Massimo whipped his head around to stare at me, his eyes wide with utter disbelief. You did this to, looked at him, my expression entirely relaxed. I gave a casual, elegant shrug. Massimo, you honestly forget. Every single project in the Moreau Group, from the initial pitch to the proprietary data to the back-end code, belongs strictly to the Moreau Family Trust. I paused for a beat, watching his entire reality fracture and collapse in real time. My smile widened. Honestly, even I didn't think you'd be stupid enough to use the Moreau family's own assets to build your little rival firm. That exact moment, the fight completely left his body. He couldn't form a single word. The officers stepped forward. One on each side, they slammed the heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists. The cold bite of the metal seemed to snap something in him, and he went completely wild, thrashing toward me. Ophelia. His voice was raw, shredded with panic. You can't do this to me. We're a family, we have a child together. His eyes were completely bloodshot, his tone disintegrating into pathetic, desperate begging. I messed up, I swear to God I know I messed up. I shouldn't have let my greed get the better of me. I shouldn't have turned my back on you. I'll give the company back. I don't want any of it anymore. Just give me a break, please. Cut me some slack. Ophelia, I am begging you. I stared back at him as if he were nothing more than a complete stranger on the street. Too late, I said softly. The officers aggressively dragged him toward the exit. Liliana was still shrieking, thrashing against her restraints, sobbing and crying as her heels dragged across the polished marble floor. The chaotic noise faded into the distance. Later, the federal hammer dropped. Massimo. For the corporate embezzlement, the grand larceny, and the theft of trade secrets, he was handed a maximum sentence on all counts. He was sent straight to federal prison. The court seized every single asset from his rival firm to pay back the millions he had stolen from my family trust. Overnight, the man who had arrogantly called himself Don Moreau, a broke, disgraced felon drowning in millions of dollars of restitution debt. Word from inside the prison was that his mental state completely shattered within weeks. He spent his days packing his cell, repeating the exact same sentence like a broken record. If I had just stayed away from Liliana, if I hadn't betrayed my wife. But the world doesn't care about what-ifs. For the felony abuse of power, the asset grand larceny, and the intentional endangerment of a human life, she was handed an equally brutal prison sentence. Her stress tore through her body, and she ultimately lost the baby. Every single luxury, title, and status she had so desperately flaunted became the final, cruel irony of her life. As for me, the corporation, it returned to its rightful trajectory, completely stabilized and surging with more power than ever before. I reclaimed the center seat in the CEO's office. My mother's health stabilized, her body slowly recovering under the best medical care money could buy. And my baby was born perfectly healthy, a beautiful little girl. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse, cradling her close to my chest. Outside, the endless lights of the New York skyline danced across the glass. An associate had asked me earlier that day during a board meeting, "Donna, do you have any regrets?" I smiled, looking down at the soft, sleeping face of the little girl in my arms. "I never regret the choices I make," I whispered into the quiet room. The only regret is ever being soft-hearted in the first place. The city lights glimmered. The world was finally quiet, and my life had only just begun. The end.
If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you won't miss the next one.